My family didn't let me say goodbye to my dying grandfather, so now I'm considering cutting ties and saying goodbye to what I thought was family. Posted by you/prettyasspeach. I just got off the phone with my grandmother, and I am truly at a loss for words. For some background, my parents have been divorced since I was a kid. My father relocated once I went to college, and my grandfather, my father's dad, started battling cancer shortly after my sophomore year. He and my grandmother were unable to attend my undergraduate or graduate school graduations because of his illness. My father, on the other hand, voluntarily skipped my graduate school graduation, citing how it wasn't that important because he already saw me walk across the stage once. This, coupled with years of emotional abuse and neglect, led me to the decision to go low to no contact with my father about 2 years ago. While my relationship with him has been strained, I tried my best to maintain a connection to my grandparents, despite the several states divide between us. My grandfather was a man of few words, but our conversations were always genuine. The last time I remember seeing my grandfather in person, which was before the stuff with my dad happened, he gave me a big hug before going to the airport, a kiss on the cheek, and told me he loved me. I would call multiple times a month, checking in, asking about their well-being, and would sometimes hear my grandfather listening in on the other line. Each time I would ask my grandmother if I could speak to him, she would make up some reason as to why he couldn't come to the phone. She kept me up to date on his treatments, and I knew things were getting bad last summer. My mom and I were going to plan a trip to visit my grandparents, who live hundreds of miles away from me, so I could say goodbye to my grandfather, as I had a feeling his time was coming. We didn't tell them about the trip and were going to do it as a surprise. The week before my mom and I were scheduled to fly out, I got a text from my aunt saying that my grandfather had passed. I was crushed. No viewing, no funeral, but they told me they were thinking of doing a celebration of life in the spring. They did cremate him, but no one other than my grandmother allegedly was present for it. I did call my dad to express my condolences, and he mentioned how my grandfather died disappointed in me because my father and I didn't speak anymore. This brings us to now. I called my grandmother to check in. She mentioned how she regrets and feels bad that I'm not as close to her and my grandfather as I am to my mom's parents, which is true, as for a period of time in my childhood, my mom and I lived with her parents. Growing up, we also lived about an hour away from them, compared to the 12-14-hour drive it would take to see my dad's side of the family. The one that they see the most and interact with the most is more than likely the favorite grandchild. What? I have one other cousin on my dad's side, so was she implying I wasn't the favorite? But here's what made my skin crawl. She gave me a play-by-play of the weeks before my grandfather passed. Apparently, my grandfather had scheduled to do a medically assisted suicide, since the state they live in is a death with dignity state, 2 days after he had passed, which still would have been the week before my trip to see them. My dad, aunts, uncles, and cousin came the weekend before to spend time with him and say their goodbyes. No one had told me of my grandfather's plan. No phone call, text, email, nothing. Then, the day of my grandfather's passing, the doctors asked my grandmother and the family present if they would like to administer a medication to keep him alive just a few hours longer so that other family and friends who may not have been present could have the chance to say goodbye. They declined, saying how my grandfather wouldn't have wanted that. His intestines twisted up because of his medications and caused sepsis, so he was in an exorbitant amount of pain. My face went hot on the phone. I understand not calling on the day of his passing when there's a lot of chaos and you're trying to process your own grief in that moment, but the fact that there was a plan for him to peacefully go that week, and I could have had a chance to say goodbye, makes my blood boil. Why didn't someone call or text about his intentions? The countless times I asked on the phone to speak to him, why couldn't she just put him on the line once? I truly don't want to believe that my grandfather was disappointed in me, but I'm starting to question why I was so out of the loop. Is it because I'm not the favorite? It took every fiber of my being to not lash out and scream as my grandmother sobbed recounting the story on the phone. I mustered up the strength to not break down and found a way to get off the phone with my grandmother. I don't know what to think, but my heart is telling me that I am no longer part of that side of the family. If there even is a celebration of life, at this point, I'm not sure I would want to go. My mom suggested I write in and get people to weigh in, but she is on my side. She's been great through all of this. So Reddit, would I be the jerk if I continue this no contact and extend it to my dad's whole side of the family after they refused to let me contact my grandfather and say goodbye before he passed away? /relevant comments. Commenter. Not the jerk. I'm willing to bet your grandfather mentioned you the most and probably made everyone somewhat jealous, and that's why they excluded you from everything. If it were me, when grandfather died, my ties with that family would have died too. Ops response. The cancer spread to his lungs, and he was on oxygen. My grandmother sometimes said his voice wasn't that strong, and he had a hard time talking. Occasionally, I would hear a faint whistling on the other line. I just made it a point to say, okay, well, just tell him I called. That I love him and miss him. I'm hoping if he was on the line those times, he heard that. Even if it was too laborsome to speak, he knew I cared about him. Update 4 days later. I decided to call my aunt, the one who had notified me via text that my grandfather had passed in the first place. She, I figured, would be the most straightforward about everything. I didn't initially go into it with the whole why didn't anyone call me so I could speak to him to say goodbye? But I wanted to get some answers. I wanted closure. I told her I was having a hard time understanding if he had a whole plan and I had numerous chances to talk to him, why I wasn't given the chance to. First, she let me know that she and, seemingly, her other siblings, including my dad, didn't know about my grandfather's wishes for a medically assisted death with dignity until after he had passed. She was consumed with her own grief over losing a father. Neither she nor anyone else had the space to call me, as they were still trying to process their own emotions regarding his death. Up until the very end, he wasn't thinking about anyone but himself. He was a very selfish man, she said. As far as the whole grandfather died disappointed in you, she vehemently denied it and apologized for my father's ignorance. She validated my feelings but questioned how much better it would have felt for me to say my goodbyes. I can't say for certain if it would or wouldn't, but I can speak to how I feel, and it sucks. My aunt insisted I didn't have that strong of a connection to him and compared my relationship to the one she had with him and the one my grandmother did. Realistically, how much of a part of your life was he? I wouldn't let somebody that didn't have that much of an impact on your life while he was alive have an impact on your life now that he's gone. I would certainly hope that my relationship with my grandfather is different than my grandmother had with her life partner. My aunt then said I didn't need validation from my dad's side of the family with all that I've accomplished in my life, but she's here if I need to talk. I'm still not sure how to move forward, but I've been journaling, per the recommendation of my therapist. Specifically, writing about my grandfather and my relationship, and the relationship with my father, has been helping me navigate my emotions, seeing it written in words. We're also adding more grief counseling topics into our sessions, so there's that. That's all I have for now. I guess be on the lookout if I ever publish a memoir. Thank you for your advice and words of wisdom. If there are any further updates, I'll be sure to share. /relevant comments. Commenter. Walk away. Nothing she said made sense. She was too devastated to call you, but he was such a monster? How much could it possibly mean to you? That's not her decision to make. Your dad with a disappointment comment, thinking about himself, utterly selfish. But he forewent the week of last respects? Why wait the week then? There is a lot of toxic bull over that side, skip it. Commenter 2. Oh sweetie. Your extended family and their opinions aren't things you have to do anything about. Your feelings and your grief about your grandpa are 100% normal and okay. You deserve all the time it takes to process this loss. It's exposed some toxicity and abuse in how the extended family, at least this aunt, communicate. Take all the time you need to fully process your thoughts and feelings about that too. Second update 2 months 1 week later. After conversations with my grandmother and my aunt, things have gone relatively quiet on their end. I moved states closer to home for a new job and have just been settling in over the last couple of months since my original post. Fast forward to a few days ago, a colleague and I were looking at obituaries and some cold cases. We like true crime shows and podcasts, and I recommended Clues. One obituary we came across in a case that caught our eye was relatively short, which my coworker said he had never seen with so little in it. I thought about my grandfather's obituary and said that my grandfather's was similar. I went to Google his to show my coworker, but to my surprise, I couldn't find it. I know my grandfather's first, middle, and last name, DOB, date of death, the funeral home he was cremated in, etc. We both thought it was weird, and I just tried to brush it off. But when I got home that night, I began digging through the obituaries on the funeral home's website and newspaper articles in his town online. Nothing. It's like my grandfather's death never happened. Now, after several conversations with the funeral home, I can confirm Dad's family took my name off the obituary. My grandfather is now listed as being survived by one grandchild, my cousin. Not only that, but someone in the family asked for it to be taken off the website. This is why I couldn't find it. I don't know when they did this, the funeral home didn't divulge, but I do know that because I'm not listed as the direct next of kin, I can't change it back. A picture of him and me from when I was 2 or 3 is literally hanging in my living room. I'm at a loss for words. I can't even fathom how you have a conversation with someone like, "Hey, why did you take my name off my grandfather's obituary?" And change it to say he only has one grandchild. I don't even think it is worth expressing to them how deeply hurtful this is. I don't even want to bring it up to them. So that's where I think I will leave this. I'm going to continue to lean on my mom and her side of the family for guidance in all of this. And of course, therapy. Thank you to everyone for your encouragement, love, and support during this time. I really appreciate it. Top/relevant comments. Commenter. If they have that little respect for you, then why are you still worried about having a relationship with them? Preserve your own sanity, and distance yourself from that mess. Commenter 2. I know this hurts. Family is so complicated. There is no right or wrong way to grieve, as the saying goes. But this is definitely the wrong way to treat someone, regardless of grief. Your relationship with him was your own. They can't take your memories. Hopefully, you can find a way to honor that relationship, but separate his death and their actions from it. Third update 3 months later. Hi everyone, a couple of months ago I shared my story of grieving my grandfather's passing, how my dad's family removed me from the obituary, and a brief glimpse of the toxic relationship between my father and me. About a month ago, I got a text from my grandmother. She invited me to my grandfather's celebration of life at her house. In the message, she told me it was going to be later this month, and that she realized it might be difficult, not to mention expensive, so if I couldn't make it, she understood. She also extended the invitation to my mother. My grandmother was right, it was going to be expensive. After some careful consideration, knowing my dad would be there, and knowing there was no way in hell I would ask him to skip out on his father's celebration of life, I decided I couldn't go. I told her I wouldn't be attending and said I couldn't continue to be in contact with that side of the family. The guilt, pressure, and pain, it's all too much. She said she understood and respected my decision. I took the time to block my other aunts and uncles on that side so that, leading up to the event, no one could try and make me feel bad for not attending. To the commenters and private messages that suggested I do my mini celebration of life, thank you. My mom and me, a year earlier, went down to the beach, talked about our favorite memories with him, and ate his favorite snacks. And last week, I decided to have one final piece of closure, not just for my grandfather, but for this chapter with my dad. I wrote letters to both of them, pouring in all my feelings and thoughts. Telling my grandfather I loved him and I was sorry that in his final moments, I wasn't allowed to be there. To my dad, unpacking the trauma and saying I would no longer be bound to the pain he has caused me. That I was no longer his daughter. My mom and I went out to the bay and I read them out loud. Then, we put the letters into glass bottles and threw them into the water, casting away these feelings I've been harboring for too long and saying one last goodbye to both of them. Surprisingly, I didn't cry as much as I thought I would, and my mom said I must have cried them all out ahead of time, and she was proud of me. We hugged and went home. So that's where this chapter ends. Thank you all for being an open ear and a place to come to for advice. Top/relevant comments. Commenter. I'm sorry your family has treated you so horribly, and that you didn't get the chance to say goodbye. With the exception of your mum, it sounds like you're making the right choice, stepping back and continuing to live your life without them in it. Well done for choosing yourself, and I hope you can find the peace you rightfully deserve now that they're no longer a part of your life. Commenter 2. That last conversation with her grandma, I just can't imagine telling my grandmother that I was just done with her whole family because they suck too much, and she just says, "Yeah, I hear you," and crosses me off the Christmas card list like it's no big deal. Op clearly cared so much more than they did. Commenter 3. We have a new contender for the Worst Father of the Year award.